Hello and welcome to the Fighting Moose podcast. I'm your host, Jason Hendrickson. In today's episode, we continue the saga of Robinson Crusoe with the story Unloading a Wreck by Daniel Defoe. Did you know that according to abebooks.com, a glimpse into the NASA library reveals astronauts' preferred reading includes A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, and London Bridges by James Patterson. I'll put a link to the article in the podcast links. Remember to visit the website for more information and downloads. Now let's turn to today's story. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin. Unloading a Wreck by Daniel Defoe. My next work was to view the country and seek a proper place for my habitation, and where to stow my goods to secure them from whatever might happen. Where I was, I yet knew not, whether on the continent or on an island, whether inhabited or not inhabited, whether in danger of wild beasts or not. There was a hill, not above a mile from me, which rose up very steep and high, and which seemed to overtop some other hills, which lay as in a ridge from it northward. I took out one of the fowling pieces, and one of the pistols, and a horn of powder, and thus armed, I traveled for discovery up to the top of that hill, where, after I had with great labor and difficulty got to the top, I saw my fate to my great affliction, viz., that I was in an island environed every way with the sea, no land to be seen, except some rocks which lay a great way off, and two small islands less than this, which lay about 3 leagues to the west. I found also that the island I was in was barren, and, as I saw good reason to believe, uninhabited, except by wild beasts, of whom, however, I saw none. Yet I saw abundance of fowls, but knew not their kinds, neither, when I killed them, could I tell what was fit for food and what not. At my coming back, I shot at a great bird which I saw sitting upon a tree on the side of a great wood. I believe it was the first gun that had been fired there since the creation of the world. I had no sooner fired, but from all parts of the wood there rose an innumerable number of fowls of many sorts, making a confused screaming, and crying every one according to his usual note, but not one of them of any kind that I knew. As for the creature I killed, I took it to be a kind of a hawk, its color and beak resembling it, but it had no talons or claws more than common. Its flesh was carrion, and fit for nothing. Contented with this discovery, I came back to my raft, and fell to work to bring my cargo on shore, which took me up the rest of that day. And what to do with myself at night I knew not, nor indeed where to rest, for I was afraid to lie down on the ground, not knowing what some wild beast might devour me, though, as I afterwards found, there was really no need for those fears. However, as well as I could, I barricaded myself round with the chests and boards that I had brought on shore, and made a kind of a hut for that night's lodging. As for food, I yet saw not which way to supply myself, except that I had seen 2 or 3 creatures, like hares, run out of the wood where I shot the fowl. I now began to consider that I might yet get a great many things out of the ship which would be useful to me, and particularly some of the rigging and sails, and such other things as might come to land, and I resolved to make another voyage on board the vessel, if possible. And as I knew that the first storm that blew must necessarily break her all in pieces, I resolved to set all other things apart till I got everything out of the ship that I could get. Then I called a council, that is to say, in my thoughts, whether I should take back the raft, but this appeared impracticable. So I resolved to go as before when the tide was down, and I did so, only that I stripped before I went from the hut, having nothing on but a checkered shirt and a pair of linen drawers and a pair of pumps on my feet. I got on board the ship as before, and prepared a second raft, and having had experience of the first, I neither made this so unwieldy, nor loaded it so hard, but yet I brought away several things very useful to me. As first, in the carpenter's stores, I found 2 or 3 bags full of nails and spikes, a great screwjack, a dozen or 2 of hatchets, and above all, the most useful thing called a grindstone. All these I secured together with several things belonging to the gunner, particularly 2 or 3 iron crows and 2 barrels of musket balls, 7 muskets, and another fowling piece, with some small quantity of powder more, a large bag full of small shot, and a great roll of sheet lead. But this last was so heavy I could not hoist it up to get it over the ship's side. Besides these things, I took all the men's clothes that I could find, and a spare foretop sail, a hammock, and some bedding, and with this I loaded my second raft, and brought them all safe on shore, to my very great comfort. I was under some apprehensions during my absence from the land that at least my provisions might be devoured on shore, but when I came back I found no sign of any visitor, only there sat a creature like a wildcat upon one of the chests, which, when I came towards it, ran away a little distance, and then stood still. She sat very composed and unconcerned, and looked full in my face, as if she had a mind to be acquainted with me. I presented my gun to her, but as she did not understand it, she was perfectly unconcerned at it. Nor did she offer to stir away, upon which I tossed her a bit of biscuit, though, by the way, I was not very free of it, for my store was not great. However, I spared her a bit, I say, and she went to it, smelled of it, and ate it, and looked as pleased for more. But I thanked her, and could spare no more, so she marched off. Having got my second cargo on shore, though I was fain to open the barrels of powder and bring them by parcels, for they were too heavy, being large casks, I went to work to make me a little tent with a sail and some poles which I cut for that purpose, and into this tent I brought everything that I knew would spoil either with rain or sun, and I piled up all the empty chests and casks up in a circle around the tent, to fortify it from any sudden attempt, whether from man or beast. When I had done this, I blocked up the door of the tent with some boards within, and an empty chest set up on end without, and spreading one of the beds upon the ground, laying my 2 pistols just at my head, and my gun at length by me, I went to bed for the first time, and slept very quietly all night, for I was very weary and heavy, for the night before I had slept little, and had labored very hard all day, as well to fetch all those things from the ship as to get them on shore. I had the biggest magazine of all kinds now that ever was laid up, I believe for one man. But I was not satisfied still, for while the ship sat upright in that posture, I thought I ought to get everything out of her that I could. So every day at low water I went on board, and brought away something or other, but particularly the third time I went, I brought away as much of the rigging as I could, as also all the small ropes and rope twine I could get, with a piece of spare canvas, which was to mend the sails upon occasion, and the barrel of wet gunpowder. In a word, I brought away all the sails first and last, only that I was fain to cut them in pieces, and bring as much at a time as I could, for they were no more useful to be sails, but as mere canvas only. But that which comforted me more still was that, at least of all, after I had made 5 or 6 such voyages as these, and thought I had nothing more to expect from the ship that was worth my meddling with, I say, after all this, I found a great hogshead of bread, and 3 large runlets of rum or spirits, and a box of sugar, and a barrel of fine flour. This was surprising to me, because I had given over expecting any more provisions, except what was spoiled by the water. I soon emptied the hogshead of that bread, and wrapped it up parcel by parcel in pieces of the sails, which I cut out, and, in a word, I got all the safe on shore also. The next day I made another voyage, and now, having plundered the ship of what was portable and fit to hand out, I began with the cables, and cutting the great cable into pieces, such as I could move, I got 2 cables and a hawser on shore, with all the ironwork I could get, and having cut down the spritsail yard, and the mizzen yard, and everything I could to make a large raft, I loaded it with all these heavy goods, and came away. But my good luck began now to leave me, for this raft was so unwieldy and so overladen that after I was entered the little cove where I had landed the rest of my goods, not being able to guide it so handily as it did the other, it overset and threw me and all my cargo into the water. As for myself, I was in no great harm, for I was near the shore, but as to my cargo, it was great part of it lost, especially the iron, which I expected would have been of great use to me. However, when the tide was out, I got most of the pieces of cable ashore, and some of the iron, though with infinite labor, for I was fain to dip for it into the water, a work which fatigued me very much. After this, I went every day on board, and brought away what I could get. It had been now 13 days on shore, and had been 11 times on board the ship, in which time I had brought away all that one pair of hands could well be supposed capable to bring, though I believe verily, had the calm weather held, I should have brought away the whole ship piece by piece. But, preparing the 12th time to go on board, I found the wind began to rise. However, at low water I went on board, and though I thought I had rummaged the cabin so effectually as that nothing more could be found, yet I discovered a locker with drawers in it, in one of which I found 2 or 3 razors, and 1 pair of large scissors, with some 10 or a dozen of good knives and forks. In another, I found about 36 pounds value in money, some European coin, some Brazil, some pieces of 8, some gold, some silver. I smiled to myself at the sight of this money. "O drug," said I aloud, "what art thou good for? Thou art not worth to me, no, not the taking off of the ground. One of those knives is worth all this heap. I have no manner of use for thee, even remain where thou art, and go to the bottom as a creature whose life is not worth saving." However, upon second thoughts, I took it away, and wrapping all this in a piece of canvas, I began to think of making another raft. But while I was preparing this, I found the sky overcast, and the wind began to rise, and in a quarter of an hour it blew a fresh gale from the shore. It presently occurred to me that I was in vain to pretend to make a raft with the wind offshore, and that it was my business to be gone before the tide of flood began. Otherwise, I would not be able to reach the shore at all. Accordingly, I let myself down into the water and swam across the channel, which lay between the ship and the sands, and even that with difficulty enough, partly with the weight of the things I had about me, and partly in the roughness of the water. For the wind rose very hastily, and before it was quite high water it blew a storm. But I was gotten home to my little tent, where I lay with all my wealth about me very secure. It blew very hard all that night, and in the morning, when I looked out, behold, no more ship was to be seen. I was a little surprised, but recovered myself with this satisfactory reflection, viz., that I had lost no time, nor abated no diligence, to get everything out of her that could be useful to me, and that indeed there was little left in her that I was able to bring away if I had had more time. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please join us next time as we continue with Robinson Crusoe and reread the story Robinson Crusoe's First Home on the Island, written by Daniel Defoe. Today's music was provided by the artist Drake Stafford. For more information, to download and or listen to audio from all our recordings, please visit www.thefightingmoose.com. And as always, try and do a random act of kindness every day.